Hi, welcome. Enjoy the content. Subscribe and turn on notifications. Jake and Lily were a couple who seemed to have it all figured out. They shared a cozy home, career successes, and most importantly, a love that felt unbreakable. After years of marriage, they started seriously talking about a shared dream, having a baby. Lily, bursting with plans and excitement, began taking the first steps to get their home ready for a little one. One morning over coffee, Lily turned to Jake with a radiant smile and shared her idea for the weekend. She suggested he used the time to paint what would become the future nursery. She gently explained that doing it now would avoid the strong paint smell later, especially since she'd be more sensitive if the pregnancy was confirmed this way. "The room will be all set when the baby arrives," she said, holding Jake's hand as if handing him the heart of that dream. At first, Jake was thrilled with the idea. He'd already pictured that room, painted in soft colors, filled with delicate furniture, space symbolizing a hope they were both nurturing with bright eyes. He agreed to her suggestion, imagining this would be the start of a new chapter in their lives. But Lily had more news. She told Jake she'd be spending the weekend with her old friend Linda on a spontaneous retreat. Lily insisted. It was just to relax, and that since she'd be away, she wouldn't have to worry about the paint fumes. Jake accepted her suggestion, naturally thinking she deserved some time to herself, while he took care of the house, started transforming that room into the dream. They both shared "it's going to be our little paradise," he thought as she spoke, and Lily looked at him as if everything was going exactly as planned. Lily, for her part, seemed almost in a hurry to leave, eager for the weekend with Linda, who had always been a close and loyal friend. She didn't hold back on how much she needed this time to unwind, to clear her mind and prepare for the changes ahead. Her voice was a mix of excitement and apprehension. Jake, ever observant, noticed she drifted off into thought when mentioning the future. Every move she made seemed filled with a new lightness, and he hugged her, feeling like this might be the moment when finally everything would start to fall into place. That afternoon, Jake decided to surprise Lily before she left for the weekend with Linda. He stopped by a nearby flower shop, picking out a bouquet of her favorite flowers. His heart was a jumble of emotions, anxiety about the future they were planning together, and above all, a deep sense of gratitude for everything they shared. He held the bouquet with special care, like it was a small token of the love he had for her and the family they were about to build when he got home. He realized Lily was still there, but there was an unusual silence on a hunch. He slipped quietly through the back door, planning to surprise her without her knowing he was there. However, momentarily stunned by what she saw, her husband deleted his heart image and left without pausing. Before he even got through the kitchen, a muffled and familiar laugh echoed down the hallway. He paused for a moment, curious, and heard Lily's lively voice chatting on the phone. He thought it might be Linda, her longtime friend, and that they were making plans for the much-anticipated retreat. A smile crossed his face, amused by her excitement. But as he listened closer, he noticed the tone of the conversation was different. It didn't sound like a typical chat between friends. He moved a bit closer, barely making a sound, and her words became clearer. Lily was laughing, carefree, and told Linda she was excited for the weekend, but not because of any retreat to relax. She mentioned a man's name, Tom. The name rolled off her lips with a familiarity Jake had never heard before, and the lightness in her voice, accompanied by a nervous laugh, made his heart race. Each word felt like a blow, and he felt the ground disappearing beneath his feet. Lily went on to share details about what they had planned. She mentioned how Linda had helped set up the meeting with Tom, and that the retreat with her was just a convenient excuse to leave home without raising suspicion. Jake listened in shock as Lily laughed and talked about how she was looking forward to the weekend and how much she deserved a little fun. It was as if each sentence erased the images he'd built in his mind about the future they'd share. Suddenly, the idea of the nursery, her sensitivity to paint fumes, the eagerness to paint the room early, all of it seemed meaningless now. Her words echoed in his mind, and he stood there feeling both vulnerable and betrayed, holding the bouquet. He realized the flowers, once so meaningful, now felt like an empty symbol, a reminder of what he thought they had, but apparently was only in his mind, not wanting to hear more, but unable to move. Jake stood there for a long moment, his mind replaying every word he'd heard, finally feeling that his romantic surprise had turned into a bitter realization. He took a few steps back toward the back door. Jake spent that night wide awake, his mind swirling with doubts and conflicting emotions. The love he felt for Lily now mixed with the sharp sting of betrayal. He couldn't decide what to do. Images of them planning their future kept flashing in his mind, but now with a different weight, as if everything had been an illusion he refused to see. As dawn broke, he made a decision. He wouldn't confront Lily directly. Instead, he'd let her reveal her true intentions on her own. The next morning, Lily came down the stairs with her bag packed, eyes sparkling, seemingly excited for the weekend. Jake watched her for a few moments, every detail of that moment etched in his mind. As she approached to say goodbye, he gently took her by the arm, his expression mixing affection with something she couldn't quite identify. He chose that moment to start a conversation he knew would be a turning point. "Before you go, I wanted to give you something," he said in a calm tone that hid the turmoil inside. Lily looked at him, surprised and curious, as he went to a drawer and pulled out a small box. She took the box, a bit puzzled, and began to open it, maybe expecting a romantic gift, something he'd gotten to make the weekend even more special. But what she found inside was nothing like she'd imagined. Inside the box were some condoms. Lily froze her face, losing its glow, as her expectant smile transformed into an expression of shock, and her mind started to flipping shut discomfort. She looked at Jake, trying to decipher the meaning of this gesture, but he kept his gaze steady, observing her every reaction. Jake broke the silence, saying calmly, "Thought you might need these for the weekend." Lily, still in shock, forced a nervous laugh, trying to play it off. But the weight of his words was overwhelming. She knew Jake had discovered something, but couldn't tell how much he knew about her intentions. What unsettled her even more was his calculated the way he looked at her without a hint of anger, just waiting for her to say something, trying to regain control. Lily let out a nervous laugh and said, "Jake, what's this supposed to mean? I'm going to spend the weekend with Linda, remember?" He didn't answer right away, just stepped a bit closer, and in his eyes, she saw a mix of hurt and determination. "I just want you to be prepared," he said. His voice so controlled it sent a chill down her spine. She knew he'd overheard something, that somehow he knew what was really going to happen that weekend. The silence that followed was heavy, a pause filled with meanings they'd never faced before in their marriage. Lily held the box in her hands, feeling the weight of Jake's gesture, realizing he knew more than she'd like, but trying to keep her composure, she let out a nervous laugh, shaking her head. "What a silly joke, Jake," she said with a forced smile. "If you were trying to make me laugh, you didn't succeed." She shrugged it off, as if trying to brush away any doubts he might have. Vanell turned toward the door before leaving. She paused for a moment, giving him a quick glance, perhaps hoping he'd respond somehow, easing the tension between them. But Jake remained still, his expression unwavering, which made Lily roll her eyes. "See you Sunday. Have a great weekend," she snapped, closing the door behind her with unnecessary force. Jake stood there watching Lily walk out the front door. She gave one last confident smile before leaving, as if everything was perfectly fine, as if nothing could derail the plan she had devised. But as she closed the door behind her, it was Jake who carried a new plan. He knew everything she claimed. The retreat with Linda, her sensitivity to paint fumes, the urgency to spend the weekend away, was all a lie. As he watched Lily walk down the sidewalk, something stirred inside. Jake had desired to confront her right then and there, to reveal that he knew every sordid detail. But he held back. He'd let her go, carrying with her the weight of a trust that in reality was already broken. Lily believed he didn't know that her weekend would be free of suspicion. She had no idea that Jake had uncovered everything, and that by leaving him behind, she was ignoring the first signs that her lie was about to unravel. Once Lily was gone, Jake stood there for a few minutes alone in the living room, feeling the silence of the house like never before. The walls seemed to observe everything, and he realized that in his attempt to do something for their future, he'd uncovered a devastating secret. He left the empty box of condoms on the coffee table, a silent, ironic reminder of what was left of their relationship. Even though the idea of calling her out was tempting, Jake chose a different path. He decided that instead of getting into a direct confrontation, he'd let Lily have her weekend as planned, while he used that time to take the necessary steps to regain control of his life after Lily left. Jake remained in that almost complete silence, feeling each heartbeat echo through the empty house. What was supposed to be a weekend of renewal and preparation for the future had turned into a period of bitter reflection and decisions he never thought he'd have to make. He glanced at the empty box of condoms on the table, a silent symbol of his recent discovery. And then the betrayal that Jake. This turning point, with a cold determination, Jake began to walk through the house. He observed every detail with a new perspective, as if seeing the life they'd built together through a different lens, every corner revealing small traces of a past that now seemed almost distant. That home, which once symbolized everything he wanted for the future, was becoming a reminder of broken promises and lost trust. With that realization came the need to take control of the situation, to rewrite what was left of his own life. Without hesitation, he went to the foyer and grabbed the spare set of keys. There was something symbolic about taking the keys and testing each one in the locks of the house. He felt the weight of each turn, as if with every lock, he was separating himself from the past, protecting himself from everything Lily had brought. When she walked through that door, Jake spent the rest of the day changing every lock in the house. Door by door, he replaced the locks, silently determined not to allow Lily to return without them. Confronting what had happened, there was no anger in his actions, just a bitter calm, a silent acceptance that, painful as it was, this had to be done. He saw each new lock as a barrier to keep the past from reaching him again. After finishing the changes, Jake gathered Lily's belongings one by one. He carefully folded each piece of clothing, sorted her books and perfumes, placing everything into suitcases and boxes, as if he were closing chapters of a book he no longer wanted to read. He felt a strange mix of sadness and relief while doing this to him. Each item was a goodbye, a small ceremony of closure. By the end of the day, Jake moved everything to the garage, placing Lily's suitcases there like a sort of temporary exile. He didn't know exactly what he'd say to her when she returned, but he knew that this act was, for him, the first step toward a new life. A life where he'd have to rebuild the trust Lily had shattered, but now without her by his side. As the sun began to set, Jake looked into the empty room he'd once thought he'd decorate for a child. He felt a pang in his chest, seeing the bare walls, imagining for a moment what could have been. But at the same time, a strange peace settled over him. He realized that from that moment on, he wouldn't have to live with the lies that were building a future that in reality would never exist. As night fell, Jake sat on the living room couch, now devoid of Lily's presence, but still filled with echoes of the past. He closed his eyes and let himself be enveloped by the deep silence that filled every corner of the house. Even though that quiet brought a sense of emptiness, it also seemed to offer an almost tangible relief, as if the space around him could finally breathe freely. He spent the early hours reflecting on everything that had happened, replaying each memory in search of answers. He questioned himself about the signs he might have missed, about what was coming. The idea that someone he loved so deeply could hide something so devastating consumed him. It was a feeling that mixed disbelief, pain, and at the same time a strength he didn't yet fully understand. As the minutes dragged on and the darkness of the night became his only companion, Jake got up and started walking through the house again, stopping at the door of the room that until recently had been the center of the plans he and Lily had shared. He opened the door and stepped inside, taking in every detail of those still bare walls. In his mind, he could still visualize the dream room he'd planned. Walls painted in soft colors, a cozy chair in the corner where he imagined he'd spend the first nights, rocking the baby. Gradually, though he realized there was no more room for dreams built on illusions, the decision he made was final, and Jake felt that with each passing moment, the house was no longer the home of a couple, but was becoming a space for personal rebuilding. He knew he'd have to face Lily when she returned, and imagine the shock on her face upon discovering that somehow he knew everything, and more than that, she'd realized that the doors of that house wouldn't be open to her anymore. As dawn broke, Jake felt exhaustion weighing on his body, but his mind remained alert, almost restless, as if waiting for Lily to appear. He knew she'd return on Sunday night, probably without suspecting anything, believing her secrets were intact. Jake decided he wouldn't leave anything to chance. He'd await her return, and when she faced a new lock in the suitcases piled in the garage, he'd finally reveal everything he'd discovered. Sunday arrived and dragged on slowly each minute, feeling like a prelude to the inevitable confrontation. Jake kept himself busy trying to distract himself with mundane tasks while he waited. But the anticipation made every second heavier, more intense. He knew the moment to face her was near, and although his heart still carried deep pain, he also felt a growing strength, a certainty that he deserved better than the lies Lily had offered late in the afternoon. The sound of a car approaching snapped him out of his thoughts. He peeked through the window and saw Lily getting out of the car, looking relaxed, as if the weekend had been for her a simple break and escape without consequences. He mentally prepared himself for what was to come, staying firm as she approached the door. Lily stopped as she turned the doorknob. Realizing something was off, she tried again, but the door was locked. The lock had been changed. Jake watched her from inside, seeing the confusion spread across her face. Lily looked around, hesitant, until her eyes landed on the garage where she saw her suitcases piled up, waiting for her outside. Her shocked and uneasy expression was immediate, and she stepped back a bit, unable to fully grasp what was happening. It was then that Jake opened the door, arms crossed, staring at her with a calm but firm expression. Lily tried to force a nervous smile, mumbling something about the mix-up with the lock. But Jake didn't budge. In a calm, serious voice, he began to speak, each word carrying the weight of everything he'd held back over the weekend. "I know about you and Tom," he said, looking her straight in the eyes. Lily's facade crumbled instantly. She tried to explain, babbling excuses, saying it was a mistake, that it didn't mean anything, but Jake cut her off, his voice sharp. He told her about what he'd heard, about the conversation with Linda, about how he'd uncovered every lie she told. Lily stood there, stunned, as Jake made it clear that this was the end. He didn't shout, didn't show anger. He simply said there was no more room for lies in his life, and that from now on he'd choose the path of truth. Alone, Lily finally grasped the depth of what she'd done, but it was too late as Jake watched her leave with her suitcases. He felt an unexpected peace, like he'd finally closed the most painful chapter of his life. Jake remained firm at the door, staring at Lily with an expression that was both calm and resolute. The confident mask she'd worn up until then fell away. She opened her mouth to speak, but he raised his hand, cutting off any excuse she might have been about to make. "Lily, your bags are in the garage," he said, his voice low and steady. "You don't belong here anymore. Not anymore." Shock washed over Lily's face as she absorbed his words, her eyes flicking between the garage and Jake's unyielding expression. She tried to stammer apologies, tears starting to form, but he remained unmoved, determined not to give in. It was too late for regrets or apologies. She finally turned and walked toward the garage, carrying with her the weight of her own choices, without comfort of forgiveness. A few weeks passed. After that night, the silence between them was now official, sealed by the divorce papers Jake signed without hesitation. Unlike Lily, he had no doubts, only the freedom to restart his life and the dream of building a sincere and meaningful future. Lily tried to contact him a few times, but Jake didn't answer her calls or reply to her messages. He knew there was nothing left to say. The life they'd had together was irreparably broken. A year went by, and Jake found something he never imagined. After all that pain, a new love. He started dating someone special, a woman with whom he discovered not only a deep connection, but also a peace. Trust he never thought he'd regain. She understood his past, and together they built a present without shadows. A relationship where honesty was key, and then came the news that would change his life forever. His girlfriend was pregnant, and Jake felt an indescribable happiness realizing that finally he'd fulfill his dream of becoming a father. This baby was the symbol of a new beginning, a new chapter filled with hope and meaning. Jake found himself smiling as he stepped into the room. He'd now turned into a nursery. He grabbed the paint cans and started painting the walls himself, each brushstroke filled with love and luck. A growing sense of pride. There was no one else to witness that moment, but he knew he was exactly where he always wanted to be. Meanwhile, Lily faced a very different reality. Her decision to prioritize fleeting adventures was taking a heavy toll. Without the financial stability and comfort she'd had with Jake, she began to feel the weight of responsibilities she'd barely noticed before. Eventually unable to support herself, Lily had to swallow her pride and move back in with her parents. She tried a few more times to call Jake, sending messages full of regret and promises to change. But he never responded. For Jake, the past was behind him. Now with a new love by his side and the promise of a family on the way, he continued painting the nursery, a true home that reflected the values he'd always wanted for himself. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notification so you won't miss any updates. See you next time.